two sisters and four brothers. And one sister died before I was born. And my other sister, Esther, she died after I was married. And then my four brothers, three of them have died, and one is living in Florida.
What's your brother's name?
My sister's name was Esther. She was the oldest in the family. Then came Leah, who I never saw, who died before I was born.
How old was she?
12 years old.
And where did she die from?
They really didn't know. They said heart or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had my brothers, my brother Nathan, and Eddie, and Marty, and Charlie. And Charlie's the one that's living in Florida. And actually, he lived up till the time they bought the condominium in Florida. He lived in Camden, or Cherry Hill. And we were a happy family. And my dad and my mother was very good to us. And being the youngest, I was a little spoiled. And
what did your brothers and sisters do? Where did they get married, and how many children did they have?
Well, my sister Esther had one son, and he was a doctor, and he also died when he was 51. And then my oldest brother Nathan, he had three children, and they're all married, and they have children. And then the same thing with my brother Charlie, and the same. Now, my brother Marty only has one son. He isn't married, Sherwin.
And what did your brothers and sisters, what did they do for a living?
Well, the boys, my brothers, they were in the wholesale and retail plumbing supply business. First it started off as hardware, then went into plumbing supply. And my sister's husband was an architect and engineer. And after she died, he remarried, and he lived until he was about 89 years old. And he passed on. And his second wife is still living, Edna.
And why don't you tell us what your parents did and where they came from?
Well, my mother and father came from Russia and had all the children in America. And my father always took chances, different types of businesses he was in. One time he was a butcher. One time he had a shoe store. One time he was in the real estate business. And then when the boys got older, he went into the plumbing and heating supply business. And after he retired when he was 60. And my brothers took over, and they were in the business. And as a matter of fact, my brother Charlie's children are still in the business in Camden.
And would they come from Russia?
Yeah, I didn't mention that. They both came from Russia. Now my in-laws, and now George was one of 6 children, and his mother and father was always a tailor, working for different people, and my mother-in-law was a housewife, and the 6 children, the oldest was Harry, and then came George, and then came Bob, and then came Ike. And the 2 girls, Sid, who was the youngest, she lives in Williamsport, and Nettie, who lives in Stamford, Connecticut. And Nettie has 2 children, a boy and a girl. Boy is a doctor, and they live in Colorado. And Sid had one son who passed away. He was born with a heart condition just a few years ago. And Harry had one daughter, and she's married, and she has 3 children. And Bob had 3 children, and they're married.
And what about Dad's parents?
Dad's parents came from, I really don't know where. I know that his father came over when he was 3 years old. That's why everybody marveled how well he spoke English. But he spent most of his life in America. And my mother-in-law came over, she was 15, and they were introduced to one another, and they got married.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about your childhood? Things you did when you were a kid that you remember.
Well, I was rather a lively little girl. I played basketball and everything that they had at school. I had sort of running. I was a good runner. And my brothers, they were always busy, always doing things. I don't really remember what they were doing, but they were busy. My brother Marty was a lawyer, and he didn't practice law, but later in life he worked in City Hall.
There you making silly faces. How about your school?
Well, I went to public school, and then I went to high school. Went to public school, and then I went to a junior high, Thomas Junior High, and then went to the senior high, South Philadelphia High School for girls. At that time, they had two, for girls and boys. Now I understand they just have one.
Why don't you tell us about the schooling that Dad had?
What?
The schooling Dad had.
Oh, Dad went to public school, then he went to high school, and then he went pre-med to Dickinson. And then one of his first jobs he had was working for Cohen's in Quakertown.
And what did he do for Cohen?
Well, he was a salesman, and he decorated the windows.
What kind of store was Cohen?
It was a small department store, specializing mostly on men's suits and things like that. And then he got connected with Vogel and Feingold.
And how did Vogel and Feingold start?
Well, the way I understand, they started making footstools, and Bob and Charlie Vogel were selling footstools, and then they start making chairs, and before they knew it, they were making living room furniture. And George learned to be a cutter, and he did the cutting, and he could do almost everything they were doing. And the business just grew.
And when did he go into business? What year?
I don't know what year he went in. I guess it's about 50 years ago.
Okay, that's before Lois?
Yes, before we were married.
Oh, he went into business before you were married.
Well, yeah, around that time, yeah.
So he left Cohen's and he went into business with
That's
his
right.
brothers.
And we used to go to Cohen's on Saturday and help them out.
That was nice.
Because they depended on them a lot.
How about some of the things you did? How about some of the things? Why don't you tell us how you met George?
Oh. Well, we lived in South Philadelphia for a while. My parents were waiting for the stores on 7th Street to empty, so we could move in and run our plumbing and heating supplies. And in the meanwhile, the store wasn't empty, so we couldn't move in. My dad owned a house in Sheridan Street, so we moved in Sheridan Street, and George his family lived across the street. And of course we were both teenagers, and after that, he moved to Souderton, and we moved to our business.
And why did he move to Souderton?
His father's place that he was working for, Goldsteins, or Goldsmiths. They made men's suits, and he was a tailor for them. So wherever they went, he went with them. So he moved to Souderton. And then I entered a little contest, and I won second prize for the True Story magazine. And I wrote an article. And
What
George...
was the article? Do you remember what the article was about?
No, I can't remember it. And George saw the article and saw that I was given second prize. And he wrote to me and told me that. And that's how the relationship started. And then he was friendly with a boy that lived 2 doors away from where I did. And he'd go to art school and come down and visit this boy. So our acquaintance started again.
And then you started going out with them?
Yeah.
Do they have dating like what?
Yeah,
What kind of dates did you go on?
Well, we went walking to the museum, went out a little for supper or dinner, and did a lot of walking because George didn't have a car. He came in by bus. They had a bus from Souderton. It wasn't exactly a bus. I don't know what they call it, a trolley or something.
And when did he propose marriage?
Oh. Well, he proposed marriage years before, but I felt he had to have a job. He had to have a job, or he had to have something before we'd get married. Well, finally, between working a little for Gogol and Feingold and working in Quakertown, we decided to have enough that maybe we could get married.
How long did you date him before you got married?
Off and on for about 3 years.
And then,
Oh,
you can ask questions.
well, did your parents have set curfews for you to what time to be in?
Yes, absolutely. Since I was the youngest, my other brothers, my sister was married, and my 3 brothers were married. Only Marty was home. And he said, now don't forget, Sil, tonight you have to be in at 11.
What, did they all like that? Did Uncle Marty like, your brothers like that?
Yeah, my brothers all liked that. But my mother, she felt that, he should be making more money. And that my father felt that moving me to Souderton wasn't very good. That I was moving far away from the family, and he didn't approve. But after we got married, George was so nice to my family that I'm sure they regretted, not feeling better towards him when we were dating.
How did George's family feel towards you?
Oh, they liked me right away. They felt too that even though he wasn't working much, but we should get married. It'll work out, My dad and my father-in-law was that way. Everything will work out.
Why don't you tell us about your wedding?
Oh yeah, I had a beautiful wedding. I had 130 people at my wedding, and it was really beautiful.
Where did you get married?
Oh, we got married at a place on Broad Street. I can't remember. It was a catering place, and they had everything set up for weddings, for our mitzvahs or anything. And then we went to Atlantic City for our honeymoon.
And how long were you going to stay for a week?
Weekend. Had to go back to work.
And then you had your 3 children.
Yeah.
And why don't you tell us about your children and what was happening when they were born?
Oh yeah. Well, the first one was Lois, and she was always a delight. And then came Alfred. Lois was almost 4 years old, 3 years and 9 months, I guess. And then came Alfred, and he was very active, but a good kid. And then years later, Stanley came, and he also, all the children were a delight as far as I was concerned, and as far as Dad was concerned. Dad was never much for little babies, but once they grew and the education started, then he got very active and became very involved.
Did Dad take a lot of time changing diapers and helping around the house?
He claims that he did, but actually he didn't. And years later when I says, you never did this, oh, he did his share. He always had a good answer. But the truth was that babies were not his delight. But when they got older, for the education, as I said before, and all, he became very involved. And of course, he was very proud of his children. Lillian, my sister-in-law Lillian used to say that all you have to get George on was education in Stanley, and then he had everything to say. I think he was a good father. I think the children, really admired him, and they gave us very, very little trouble.